Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at creating a common library using the Comm command for communication on a USB port to our LCD displays. This was the code at the end of our last video on the use of the Comm command. What this particular program actually does, it displays information on a small LCD display. Now, for today's video, I prepared two LCD displays connected up to the same computer, as shown here. Now, because we have two of these connected to the system, they will show up as two different COM ports. We have one showing up as COM3 and one showing up as COM4. We're going to create a library today that's going to allow us to actually address each of these individually, so that should we need to use the LCD display in any of our programs, it'll be quite easy to just add the library to the compilation. And then anytime within our application we wish to send a message to the LCD display, we can simply call one of the routines sitting within the library. So if we run this program now, let's see what we would get. There we go. COM3 would display a message on the top LCD display. And if we have a look at the code, we'll see in here we had put the value odroid004 into the input variable. We have opened COM3, which in this case is the top LCD. We have then sent the message to the display to make the background green. And then for each of the next 5 seconds, we have actually sent a message to clear the display, display the input, and the time. Now, if we change this to COM4, we should see the same information appearing on the bottom display. And there we have the information appearing on the bottom display. So we've got the kernel of our library already set up. We just need to create the library itself. So what we will do, we will create a new file. And we'll make this a straightforward console program. And we will save this, and we will save it into our COM library. And we'll call this one LCD display, and we'll give it the INC extension so we can include it. So there's the beginning of our library. Now if we look at what we're going to put into our library, we will want all of these constants, so we'll just cut these all out of here and we'll paste them straight into here, since they're all going to be used. The beauty of putting it into a library is at any point in the future we can actually just simply add to the library. Add more functions, more constants, anything we need. And then any program that is recompiled with that library at the top should then inherit all the new functions and updated constants. So thinking ahead, what are we going to need to do? Well, we'll need something to actually open up a COM port. So if we were changing our program here to use a new function, we would want to, first of all, tell it what to send. So the first thing we're doing here is we're setting the color of the screen. So let's create a function to perform that. So we'll call this new function LCD set color, and we'll set it so that we'll return either a true or a false. If it returns false, then we assume we weren't able to set the colour and we'll return a false. If we manage to set the colour, we'll return a true. Now we're going to have to give a parameter here, which should be the colour. Now we'll pass this as a constant, and we'll call it LCD green. So in our library, we will set up LCD green, just to make it nice and simple, and we'll make it equal to the existing constant we've got in here. And we'll do the same for the other ones. We'll say a yellow one. And we'll do a blue one as well. We can always expand on these later. Right, that handles our parameter. Now we have to do is set up the function that actually performs it. Now these are going to be strings we're passing. And we're going to be returning a long. Now all we did to set the actual colour, so all we need to do is to send this to our COM port. Now as you can probably guess, we don't know what the COM port number is actually. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pass details of which COM port we're going to try and connect to. So we'll probably need some kind of initialization function before we do anything. So at this point we need to decide, are we going to open the COM port for each command, or are we going to open it once and then close it at the end? So I think what we'll do is we'll do an initialization routine. So we'll do an initialization routine first and we'll get back the COM port. So let's create an initialization one that takes in the COM port as a parameter. Doing it this way will allow us to use several LCD displays if we wish at any one time, since we could have several COM streams open at the one time. So in our code, what we did was we got a free file handle and then we opened the COM port. So we're going to copy that routine into our function. And that's going to be our COM port we're opening. So we'll put that in there. And we're going to be passing back HCOM. So we will declare that one up at the top. So if we can open the COM port, then the function will return basically 0. Otherwise, it will return the handle. So that should handle the opening of the COM port. And we're going to pass that as the first parameter of the setting the color, so it knows which one it's doing. So we'll need the COM port in there. So let's turn off these displays so we get more screen real estate to work with. Right, okay. So our initialize handler will open the COM port, give us back the handle of the COM port it's opened, and the LCD set color will set the color on that COM port and then return. And we will work on the assumption that it has all worked. And return true if it's worked, and false if it hasn't. So this allows us to set the colour. So we've opened the port, we've set the colour to green, and we want something to clear the display. So we'll want a nice little clear display command. So again, we're going to have to pass in the COM port, which tells us which display we're actually clearing. And that's probably all we'll need. We'll just return a true and a false for that one. So we will then send that command. And we'll do exactly the same here. That should handle that. So that should clear our display. And then we want to display some information. So we'll want a standard display info. And again, we'll have to pass the HCOM and in this case our data. So another function for this. And the beauty of doing these as individual functions will mean that should anything actually go wrong, you can actually test the return of the function to decide what you want to do next. So sending the message to the port to display the information. Now, do we want a character return line feed on the end of each one? That's a good question. I think if we basically add the character return line feed to the input, that will probably be cleaner. That way we don't have to use it in here. So that will display the information. And the first one we'll just add it on there. And the second one we will put straight in as the exact same command. And the only difference here is we're putting in time. Right, okay. So we're opening the port, we're setting the colour, we're clearing the display, we're displaying the information first of all for the Odroid 004. Let's just change that to 5 this time. We're then displaying the time. Now in our code here, we're going to be running around this several times. We'll just do it once initially. And the last thing we want to do is to close the COM port. So since we've got an open port, we will have a close port function. Let's make them all with an underline after the LCD to keep the standard the same. And this one will just need to have the HCOM. Right, okay. If we're going to replace all of this, after we've done all this, we can then call, because we want display, we want underline in there. We want the final command to close it down. So we'll just give it that. So if we comment out all this logic at the end, so it doesn't function, our code is nice and tidy. We will want to include our new library at the top. And our new library was called LCD display. So let's try a quick compile on that to make sure we haven't missed anything, which strangely we haven't. Now if we bring our display back up, we can see we've got Odroid 4 on both of the displays at the moment. So if we run this now, we should have Odroid 5 appearing on the COM 3 display. It should, in fact, let's change the colour just to be different. We will go with, let's try blue rather than green, so we definitely see a change. We'll clear the display, display the input and put the time in. So if we try running that now, well, we have a change to the time. And it is displaying Odroid 5 on the top display, but we don't appear to have changed the colour. So what have we missed on the setting of the colour? Right, okay, so obviously we've missed something in the code, so let's have a look at the function that actually sets the colour. And there it's there, so we're passing in the COM parameter and the colour. We have hard-coded the colour into the command. So what we need to do is actually replace it with the actual variable so it doesn't set it as green every time. So now if we change it from light green to, for example, red, if we run the same code now, it should indeed change the colour to red, which it does. So we now have a set of functions to open our port to the display. We can set the colour in a port, we can clear a display, we can display information on the LCD display itself. In this case we're adding on a carriage return line feed in the first one, so that the second line we're sending appears on the line below. And if we wanted to emulate the code we had in the bottom, then all we would need is a simple for next loop. In fact, we'll put the for next loop in for the clear. And we will put a sleep command for 1 second. so it will display every second. So if we run that now, it would display quite happily in the bottom display a command that was being updated every second for 5 seconds. So now we have that in place, we can remove the large piece of code at the bottom, and we now have a set of commands we can use to send messages to our display, to either of the displays. And there it's going to the top display. So you're only limited here by the number of COM ports you can use on your computer. We're only using 2 here, but our display LCD rack can have 4 displays on it. And as long as you have enough USB ports on your computer, you can add quite a number of displays. The intention is to have each of these displays connected to a different Odroid computer, so we can display statuses during the running of its programs. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.